Okay, so just a quick overview of the week ahead. We have 4 regular days, sort of, 3 at home, but then the rest of it, regular time frame, I guess. And then Friday is your early release. So on Monday, which is today, we're going to do the warm-up. We're going to review for the test. And then tomorrow, you're going to take part 1, which was with the calculator. We're going to talk a little bit about like what to expect on that today. Wednesday, I'll go over the stuff that we didn't cover on Tuesday's test. And then Thursday, you'll take that second part of your test. And then we're going to get into Chapter 5 on Friday. So Chapter 5 is verifying trig identities. It gets into like sum and difference, if you remember that stuff. It gets into multiple and double angles, which you guys didn't do last year. We're going to do that a little bit. And then you'll get that one last test on Chapter 5. I'm gonna, because we dragged this week out, I'm gonna try to see if I can get in that third quiz. You may not get to that third quiz. You'll definitely get to that third test, right, which is Chapter 5. And it'll be like the last Tuesday before we leave. So I'll try to get another quiz assignment in there so you get 3 and 3, just so you can kind of get an idea of what is coming. Okay, so before we even get into doing the warm-up, I would recommend, again, you do this, and you don't really need it for tomorrow's portion, but you're definitely going to want it for Thursday's portion. I would make sure that you take that unit circle, that you add on the tangents, at least in one quadrant. So this would be root 3 over 3. This is 1. This is root 3. This is 0. And again, so I would do like blue equals tangent, something like that. It's undefined here. And then for this section, I would definitely, I don't want to group these. Hang on. Okay, again, for this section, I would definitely add on the parts that are restricted. So remember your sine and your tangent goes from the 4th quadrant to the 1st quadrant, but we do the negative angle. So this would be negative pi. Actually, let me do it a different color so I know all the blue is. So this would be negative pi over 6. This is negative pi over 4. Negative pi over 3, and then negative pi over 2. And then I would probably add on the tangents into those just so that it's easier. This would be negative root 3 over 3. This would be negative 1. This would be negative root 3. And this would be undefined again. Then I would go back and add cosine would be 1st and 2nd quadrants. And those you don't really have to do anything with. You just got to know that those would be 1st and 2nd. I would also say before Thursday you want to add on like your triples, your 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 5, 12, 13, 7, 24, 25, 8, 15, 17. At least those, those are like, that should be a 17. Those are the more common ones. You definitely want those to be somewhere that's easy to reference. But again, you don't want to spend a ton of time having to dig through your notes. So try to keep these as condensed as possible. I'm going to try to condense a little bit for you today, but I would say you definitely want to condense them. All right, so then based on that reference, okay, that unit circle, we can look at the questions from today's warm-up. I'm actually going to add one more on here too because that's kind of what would be on tomorrow's stuff. So every question that's on this one as it is would be on Thursday's section because they all don't need a calculator and they reference the unit circle. Number 1 says find the exact values of cosine -1 of -1. So because cosine is my x value, I'm going to look at my unit circle for where my cosine is, or my x, sorry, is -1, which happens over here at pi. So pi is the answer to that. Remember, you always want to give inverse in radians. Number 2 says find the exact value of tan -1 of -3. So I want to look at my unit circle for where tangent, which is the 4th quadrant and 1st quadrant, where that would be negative root 3, and that's going to happen down here. But instead of saying 5 pi over 3, we say negative pi over 3. If this was an open-ended question, it would be written as negative pi as in pi divided by 3, like that. If it's multiple choice, obviously, you'll see it. Number 3, find the exact value of cotangent cosine -1 1/2. So there's actually two ways to do this because that is a unit circle point. I can look at my unit circle. I could find where my x is positive 1/2, which happens at this angle here, pi over 3. And then I can find the cotangent at pi over 3. Tangent at pi over 3 is root 3, which means the cotangent would be 1 over root 3 or rationalized root 3 over 3. So that's the end result that you're looking for. You can also find it by doing a right triangle. So if I didn't use my unit circle, I could set up my right triangle. Cosine would be adjacent over hypotenuse. So I would set up those two sides. Use the Pythagorean theorem to find the missing side. X equals the square root of 3. And these would be kept exact. So you do have a couple questions, not one like this, but you do have a couple of questions on your test part tomorrow that do not require a calculator, but it says keep it exact, and that's how you would know not to round this number. You would keep it as that root 3. So then cotangent would be adjacent over opposite. Adjacent is 1, opposite's root 3. That gets rationalized to root 3 over 3. So you actually have the choice to use that unit circle because this is one of those unit circle angles, or you could use your triangles. Completely up to you. So again, all those types of questions you would see on Thursday. Something you would see tomorrow based on this section would be something like find the arc cosine of 0.75, something like that. That's not a unit circle angle, so you can't use your unit circle. You have to use your calculator. You, remember, have to have a scientific calculator for tomorrow. It can be graphing or scientific, but you need at minimum scientific. I will give you the lockdown one if you want to use that one, but obviously I would stick to what you're used to. Because this is inverse, what mode does my calculator need to be in for these questions?
Radians.
Good, radians. So I'm going to make sure it's in radians. And then there's no such thing as arc cosine on my calculator, so I'm going to do cosine -1 of 0.75, and I get 0.72727. It'll probably say, I think this one says round to the nearest tenth. I mean, or 2 decimal places. If it said 4, it'd be 0.7227, like that. So those questions, that question specifically, should be an easy 5 points. But if you're in the wrong mode, you're not going to get it. So make sure you're really careful. Questions on that? Oh, there's a man. So this is how I kind of restructured the review assignments, hopefully to try to like separate it out for you guys. The review video is still linked there in the top, and it says like adjustments because this is last year's video. The calculator part will be given on Tuesday. The non-calculator part, which includes the graphing, would be on Thursday. And you don't have to fill, I mentioned a couple of times on the video, oh, you can fill in your unit circle the day before. You obviously don't need to do that because you can use a filled in unit circle. Part 1, which is what's going to be given tomorrow, is with calculators. The review, I took the review that was blank and I highlighted which ones are would be good to review for tomorrow. That's that linked PDF that's there, and it says don't forget your calculators. And then part 2, I'll go back and highlight the other ones and I'll add it under part 2, and it talks about the graphs. So you can kind of ignore part 2 for now. I know you guys like to cram. So if you want to just focus on part 1 for today, that's how you can do it. And then the solutions are still there on the bottom. The actual solutions that are the evens are worked out on the PDF. The odd answers, you'll go to the old calc chat because it's the old book. And then this would be chapter 4. The review part, the first one is under section R. And then the extra review is under section T. There's really only 4 questions from the section, from the extra review that pertain to tomorrow. So I wouldn't spend too much time on it unless you are already done with everything for that first review. Questions on that assignment? Yep.
So do both parts of the test have graphing?
No, there's no graphing on tomorrow's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so this is pretty much what's going to be covered on part 1. I'll go section by section, and then I'll zoom out at the end because I'm going to add a couple of things. If you want to take a screenshot, you can. If you're a person that remembers things by writing it, feel free to write it out with me as I go through it. Okay, first part is just a little logistics. Obviously, this is part 1, which would be tomorrow. You do need a calculator. It's 9 questions, and they're 5 points apiece. So you're going to be done with 45 points tomorrow. I'm going to give you 30 minutes to do it. Should be plenty of time, okay? And then you'll submit your work. You'll do it on lockdown. Those of you that have been in the building with me, you haven't really had to do like the 2 devices in a while. So please make sure you remember that you're going to have to get logged on from a second device tomorrow. Make sure everything's charged. And make sure you're on time so that we can kind of get everything started. So in 4-1, the only 3 things that are on tomorrow's part are the coterminals, the complement, and the supplement. The coterminal, remember that if it's in degrees, we add and subtract 360. If it's in radians, we add and subtract 2 pi. It's going to ask you for positive, negative. If it's positive, it's got to be positive. If it's negative, it's got to be negative. The complement, if it's in degrees, we subtract the angle from 90. If it's in radians, we subtract the angle from pi over 2. Supplement, if it's in degrees, it's 180. If it's in radians, it's pi. Remember that these can't be negative. So if it's bigger than 90 or pi over 2, it will not have a complement, and if it's bigger than 180 or pi, it will not have a supplement.
The radians can be what's it called, like actual numbers, right?
Yep.
Okay, and the only reason we would know it's degrees is because like if it had like the little degree symbol, right?
Correct. It has to have the degree symbol. So I won't probably put a radians on that isn't with pi on the complement supplement, just because you'd have to know the equivalent, like that pi over 2. You'd have to do 3.14 divided by 2 to figure out if it's going to be negative or positive. But you could see coterminal or something like that. Even coterminal, you wouldn't see it in this section. You would see it where you're trying to find like sine, cosine, tangent, maybe in the next section.
Okay, so like all the 4.1 stuff, you're probably going to be putting like it with pi, so we would know.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only thing we did with 4.1 that didn't was like a graph. Like if I told you to plot that angle and I put like 2.5. But that's not on tomorrow. Yeah, that's on tomorrow's stuff.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, 4.2 was using the calculator to find sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. Again, should be an easy gimme question. Watch your rounding. It'll tell you what to round to. And watch your mode. So you're going to have to flip back and forth between degrees and radians depending on the order of your test. If it's in degrees, obviously, it's going to have that little symbol, okay? If it's in degree, minute, second notation, like 30 degrees, 15 minutes, 4 seconds, remember you need to know how to do that, and that's where it's going to get really tricky if you don't have the calculator you've already been using. And then radians, this could be where it is something like 5 pi over 2, or it could be something like 2.3. So be careful because those are both radians. And obviously you've got your sine, cosine, tangent buttons, but remember that secant would have to be 1 over sine, and then cosine would be cosecant would be 1 over sine, and cotangent would be 1 over tangent. So again, should be a super easy question. Don't want to get things wrong because of careless mistakes. Also on tomorrow's part from 4.2 is even and odd functions. So remember, cosine and secant are even, which means even if you change the sign on the angle, the trig value does not change signs. And then the sine, cosine, the tangent, the sine, the tangent, the cosecant, the cotangent are all odd. So if I gave you that the cosine of t equals negative 2/3, and I ask for the cosine of negative t, it stays negative 2/3. But if I gave you like sine of t is negative 2/3, and then I ask for the sine of negative t, it would change the sign, so it'd be a positive 2/3. So if you change the sign on the angle and it's cosine and secant, it does not change. If you change the sign on the angle and it's sine, tangent, cosecant, or cotangent, it does change. So that calculator is not helpful in like that kind of question, which is why I put it on tomorrow, because you don't need it, and it doesn't help. It's not like the unit circle ones. The unit circle ones I saved for Thursday, but I didn't want to give too much for Thursday because there's a lot of graphing. Anybody still copying that down? Can't see your faces like I do in class. Sophia, are you copying down? Yeah, okay. I'll leave it. You just let me know when. We've got time. There's some breathing room.
I got it. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, 4-3 was your right triangle trig. So the really only thing that comes from this section is your word problems with right triangle. Remember your angle of elevation, your angle of depression, that kind of stuff. It does not have a picture. You're going to have to draw your picture. So if you struggle with that, try to review those questions. These are always in degrees, okay? Do they exist outside of this class in radians? Sure, but these are always in degrees. So you're going to make sure you're in degrees for these. And then you could see something like given cosine is 2/3, find the other trig values, where you have to set up your right triangle. Put theta in the corner. Cosine would be adjacent over hypotenuse. I'd find the missing side by using the Pythagorean theorem. X would equal the square root of 21. And then I would find the other trig functions using those values. This again would be kept exact, so you can't use a calculator to find, you can't, like you can use it to like square 25 if you need to, but not to find the actual value of 21. That would be kept exact. And then you'll set up your sine, cosine, tangent, whatever else it might ask you. It's not going to ask for all 6, but it'll ask you for one or a couple, and you'll want to be able to set those up. Always rationalize, always simplify. Okay, 4-4 came next. This was your trig functions of any angle. So a lot of this is moved outside. This was like unit circle based. A lot of that stuff will be on Thursday's part. What you will see for tomorrow is something where it says like given the terminal point, find the trig functions. So you again don't need the calculator, but it doesn't help you here because these are kept exact. If I had 3, -8, I would move to the right 3 and I would move down 8. So I'd get 3, -8. I'd put theta in the corner. I'd use my Pythagorean theorem to find the radius, which is always positive. And then you'd be able to find whatever trig values it's going to ask you for. So just be really careful with your signs on that stuff. And then in 4-4, you also had like the displacement word problem where I say something like there's a spring and it's being pulled, so it goes up and down and up and down. And there's a function like y equals 1/6 sine 2t. Find the value or find the displacement when t is 4. And so all you have to do is take and plug that in. So I would do 1/6 sine 2 times 4. So just be careful because your calculator will automatically open the 2 parentheses, and you want to make sure you either simplify it to be 8 or you want to make sure those parentheses stay open. So 1 divided by 6 times the sine. And this is in radians. Okay. Oh, I wrote it down here. It's in radians because there's no degree symbol there. So I'm still in radians. 1/6 sine 2 times 4. And I get 0.6 or 1/6,489. So it'd be 0.1649 if I rounded it to 4 decimal places. Again, it will tell you what to round to, so just be careful. That is example 11 in the notes because that's not on the review PDF. So if you need to review it, make sure you go back. That was example 11 on the notes, and then I think there was one in the homework on the website. And then the last thing for tomorrow's part is 4-7, which is the inverse trig functions using a calculator. So this is like how we finish the warm-up, right? It's arc something or arc sine, arc tangent. But remember that those are the same things as negative ones. So I would do like cosine negative 1 of 0.325. And again, in radians. So cosine negative 1.325 would be 1.23978. So 98. So if it was 4 decimal places, it'd be that. Okay, questions on any of those? So I'll zoom back out so if you want to take a screenshot, you can. Obviously, if you don't understand that screenshot, it will not help you. Gotta obviously know what that stuff means.
Miss Chris Weiser, it'll tell you how much to round to, right?
Yes, each question says either round to the nearest tenth or or 2 decimal places or 4 decimal places. That's really it. Tenth. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Miss Chris Weiser, how would I do the degrees, minutes, seconds thing again?
So which calculator do you have?
I have a Kraken.
Okay, so let's do that
The
one.
T83.
Yep. Some of these also require almost no work. So when you turn in your work at the end, which you'll do just like you've been doing, and let's just say it said this, right? Like let's say cosine negative 1 of 0.325 was the question. Or actually arc cosine maybe is the question. And let's say that's number 4. Then next to number 4, I would literally just write cosine negative 1 of 0.325. And that's your kind of, I mean, that's basically what you plugged in. Should something go wrong, should you be in the right mode or the wrong mode, sorry, and I want to give partial credit, I can't do anything if you write nothing down. So just keep that in mind. Most of them are going to require a couple of steps, but there are ones where it's solely calculator use. So just be really careful. Yeah.
If we don't see a degree sign, we just use radians.
Correct. Okay. All right. So if I want to find secant, I'm going to do 1 divided by, well, first of all, this is in degrees. So I'm going to go to my mode. I'm going to switch it to degrees. 1 divided by cosine. Now 5 degrees. 5 is obviously there. Degrees is under the second apps. So I do second apps and I grab the degree symbol. 15, I go back to that same menu, second apps, single tick mark. And then 32, this one's weird. It's down here above the plus symbol. It's alpha plus, and I get the double tick mark, and then I hit enter. 1.0042 would be the answer there. Good, Gianna? Yeah. Remember that that's going to change depending on the calculator you're using. So you definitely don't want to be trying. Like, I cannot answer how to use a calculator tomorrow while you're taking your test. I wouldn't do it live in person, and I won't do it on Zoom. So you need to make sure that whatever calculator you're using, you know what to do with, okay? And that you're rounding carefully. Like, all that stuff you want to definitely make sure that you're practicing with today.
Ms. Cruiser, also, thing right below it, radians. I don't know why. I don't know why I got really lost. Yeah.
So you have to know that's radians.
Right.
So my calculator would have to be in radians. And then cosine 2.3, negative 0.66. Ooh, I didn't mean to do that. 3. And then if it said cosine 2.3 degrees, now I got to put it in degrees. So you just got to be really careful and pay attention to your mode because it will cost you 2.3. That's 0.9992.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the degrees that I would just change the mode, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, so I went through, like I said, I took the review. So if you already started it over the break, fantastic. If you want to go back through and compare it now to the ones I highlighted, everything that's highlighted in purple is what's going to be on tomorrow's portion. So again, positive, negative, coterminal in both radians and degrees. You don't have to convert from decimal degree to degree, but you do need to know how to find that, like we just did for 14, something like that. Could say sine of that. The complement and supplement of both radians and degrees, which is 30 and 34. The arc length is, I saved that for Thursday section. In 4.2, something like 61 and 62, that's your even odd properties. In 4.3, the directions are down there on the bottom left, but the problem's up on the top right. That's where you'd set up a triangle and then figure out the rest of your functions from that. Using the calculator to find your inverse functions in both degrees and radians. Not inverse functions, sorry. Your original trig functions and then the reciprocal functions. The calculator ones like 83 and 84 that are in degrees. And then 4.4 where you're given the terminal point of an angle and you set up your right triangle like we just made. It's continued. Yeah, just that. 4.4, there's none of these from your, that bottom one. And then the displacement word problem was from 4.4. The graph, which is 4.5 and 4.6, is on Thursday's part. The last purple thing, which is tomorrow's part, was using the calculator to find the inverse trig function. And again, you want to remember that those are in radians. So all these solutions, again, the evens are on the PDF that's attached. The odds are on CalcChat, but you got to go to the old link. And this would be like chapter 4, section R for review, and then go to your and then go to the individual number. Questions, again, last minute questions. I actually have like a little 5-question Kahoot I'd love to play if there's no questions. All right, let's do it. So go 5 pi over 7. If you forget, right, remember, like if you forget to check to see if that's bigger than a half pi, the complement would be pi over 2 minus 5 pi over 7. You'd have to change these to both have the same denominator. And I end up with negative. You can't have a negative complement. So the rule is anything bigger than pi over 2 cannot have a complement. So if I was to try to figure out what that would be, half of 7 is 3.5. So 3.5 pi over 7 is the same thing as a half pi. And because 5 is bigger than 3.5, it's too big to have a complement. It can have a supplement, but it's too big to have a complement.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? So the only other thing I'll say is a quick